Greetings, Crusaders. You're listening to Character Crusade, Skyrim Roleplay Workshop. I'm Stu. This is episode 20, the 5 Fables preview. Welcome everybody back to Character Crusade. I hope you all had a great holiday celebration, and we are all really looking forward to 2016. I hope you are too. We've got lots of big plans, and we thought it would be kind of fun to kick it off with a 5 Fables preview. Those of you who are familiar with the CouchWarrior TV YouTube channel know that that is something I've been doing for quite a long time. That's been around long before the podcast started. For those of you who were introduced to us through the podcast, yes, there is a YouTube channel out there called CouchWarrior TV. I've been running that off and on for about 3 years or so. And one of the things that came of that channel when it first started was a Let's Play called Aranis Arcana. We have mentioned it several times. In fact, we had a special feature episode on Aranis Arcana a while back. I think it was, episode 11 maybe. And really what that was is something that started out as a Let's Play and transformed into something else. It transformed into kind of a cinematic storytelling experiment, and frankly, it went really well. It was actually kind of amazing. It turned into sort of a community story, and every time an episode came out, it was a little bit of an event. It was a lot of fun, but it got to a point where I couldn't maintain it. Now, that was the impetus for me taking about a year off, rethinking what I was doing, and then subsequently the launch of this podcast, Character Crusade. Now that I've had some time to get organized, to figure out how all of this stuff fits into real life, and also with the gracious assistance of Joe and Matt, there's an opportunity now to launch the next creative project. So, late in 2015, I suppose it was toward the end of November, we put out a video on CouchWarrior TV announcing, I guess, what's billed as a new Let's Live called the 5 Fables. The video we put out was billed as a prologue. I called it a prologue. And what it did was sort of loosely set the stage for an upcoming story. Now, you may be asking, what is a Let's Live? That sounds different, Stu. Well, it is. Those of you who are avid followers of Aranis Arcana understand how that whole experience evolved. And really what it came down to was what I was doing was a combination of both a Let's Play and a role play and a machinima, all kind of rolled into one. I think there are varying definitions of what constitutes a Let's Play and what constitutes a role play on YouTube. And I think that what Aranus Arcana evolved into did not neatly fit into the definition of any of those. So, for example, typically people think of a Let's Play as, okay, I'm a channel owner, I am going to play this game, and I'm going to switch the camera on while I do it, and I'm going to offer some commentary while I play. That's typically a Let's Play. A role play is often described as a Let's Play type experience, but rather than receiving commentary, what we get from the content creator is really an in-character experience. So they basically play a character, they voice that character, they speak from that character's perspective, and there are other sprinklings of perhaps storytelling elements in there, such as journal readings or things like that, right? Well, I'm not really fitting into either one of those categories, and that's honestly not what I want to do. So on the channel, as I was producing this and getting lots and lots of great feedback from all the viewers, we kind of arrived on this idea that it's sort of a let's live, right? We're kind of living the game, and on the one hand, we're experiencing the story with some elements of role play, but on the other hand, we're also getting some commentary mixed in as well on occasion, where we get to talk a little bit about the game that we love so much, rather than having it just be an in-character kind of experience. And my commentary tends to be commentary focused on role play ideas or things in the game that I find interesting, stuff like that. Typically, I'm not, my objective is not to provide comedic entertainment, if you will. There are many YouTubers who are way better at that than I am. So what I like to tell a story. So really what we came up with was this term of let's live. I believe that 5 Fables fits into that let's live category. I think it adheres to sort of these informal rules that the CouchWarrior TV community has created around what is a let's live. However, my objective here is really to take 5 Fables to the next level. So I guess the next obvious question is, well, what does that mean? So what can we expect? What can you, the viewer, expect from 5 Fables? Really what 5 Fables is it's a story written by me in screenplay form. Every episode that you view will have a written screenplay behind it. And it is a combination of kind of a let's play experience, a machinima experience, a role play experience, but I believe that this time around, rather than seeing something of an evolution where it evolved from one thing to another, we are starting this story in this kind of let's live format and continuing that on through. And I will be putting much greater emphasis on storytelling and character development and intricate plot lines than I did in Aranus Arcana. Those of you who followed that story understood that by the end it did actually get quite complex. And we had subplots going on, we had some other characters, although we didn't follow them extensively. Mostly we saw those other characters through the eyes of our protagonist, Fleet, who was something of an anti-hero in the story. In this particular case, it's made more complex by the fact that I have elected to tell a much more sophisticated and grown-up kind of story in which we have 5 protagonists, all of whom will give us a view into the larger story arc. So it's certainly going to be much more involved. What is the story about? 5 Fables is the story of a world in crisis and the extraordinary individuals who rise up to save it. In essence, that's what it is at the highest level. The events of the 5 fables kind of eclipse the quests contained in Skyrim, and it pulls together all of those different story threads into a complete and kind of rich tapestry of mystery and violence and love and loss. And it's all told from the perspectives of those who lived the glorious nightmare. Not just our 5 protagonists, but a lot of other supporting characters. And we will even get, I think, some great perspectives from our antagonists in this story. That's the beauty of this whole thing, is that given the platform I have, I've got a lot of creative freedom when it comes to telling this story from all the different angles that I want to tell it from. So that is really the story at the highest level. But what this really does is it takes us into the minds and experiences of many of the characters involved in this, but all of the story elements and action kind of swirls around the fables themselves. So if you haven't watched the prologue, I would encourage you to go and do that. It kind of lays out the basic premise going in and gives you a very cursory introduction to these characters. My intent is that this is a work of speculative fiction that is set in the Elder Scrolls universe. It takes place in Skyrim during the events of the Skyrim game that we are all familiar with. But this is my take on all of that. And what I am producing is kind of a macro level story that incorporates and weaves together many of the things that we see present in the game, in DLC, and even in some quest mods. And I mix them all together into what seems to me to be a cohesive story. So for me, it's been kind of a real exercise in just getting all of that organized and figuring out, where I'm going to start, what's going to be included, what characters are going to pursue what quests, and how those relate to one another, things like that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the format for this. I've described it as a Let's Live, and I've gone into some detail describing what that is. This will be released only on YouTube, and what you can expect is that the episodes of 5 Fables will probably run anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. You will get an intro sequence and an outro sequence complete with credits. Credits will be listing, any music that I included in this that was not from, kind of a stock music archive. So anything where I need to attribute the artist, I will be putting that in the credits. I will also be putting in the credits any of the mods that I have used in production of the series. So you'll always be able to look at the credits and see what mods were in use. I will also be putting into the credits of every episode all of those individuals who have contributed to supporting the 5 Fables story on Patreon. And so that, that is kind of our lead in, is a sort of our cinematic lead in to say, okay, starting a new episode, and it kind of gives you a little bit of information on who is participating in production. And in the credits, you'll get all those resources. In between, you'll get a combination of kind of cinematic and dialogue sequences, as well as some gameplay. There will be some episodes that will be very heavy on machinima kind of content, where we're really focusing on establishing a story or something like that. And then there will be others that will be very focused on just kind of following a character through a dungeon or through a gameplay experience. But the difference here is that these gameplay experiences will not be obviously like a typical Let's Play. In some cases, I will be providing some commentary as CouchWarrior, and will be breaking the fourth wall a little bit. However, there will be other times when the entire gameplay sequence will be done as a role play. It'll be done in character, or some combination of the two. And then other instances where we may see a section of gameplay that is just completely narrated by Spurious Teufel, who is our Imperial narrator. So it's going to be mixed up a little bit, just depending on what the story needs at that time. I really struggled with that format for a long time. I thought, you know what, does it make sense for me to do this as CouchWarrior, or do I do the gameplay sequences completely as a role play, totally in character the whole time? And I think I vacillated back and forth a lot because I was interested in preserving immersion, which, begs the question, well, role play is about immersion, so that's a great solution there. However, one of the things that I think made Aranis Arcana special was that we had those character moments, but also had those personal moments where, me as the author / gamer was able to kind of play through the game and talk to you, the viewers and listeners, as I was doing that. There's something personal about that I like, and I think is really important to the CouchWarrior style. It's part of what made Aranis Arcana special, so I didn't want to lose that either. So what I decided is that I'm going to kind of leave it open, and I'm going to do whatever the story requires. So if the story requires that I do an entire gameplay sequence in character because it benefits the story and pushes the story forward, then that's what I'll do. If that's not necessarily the case, and what we need is some interaction, need me to get on the mic and let's talk a little bit about the story and the background and what everybody's doing and where we are with things, and what is our Skyrim experience like, and are we, what are we doing, those kinds of things. I want to be able to do that too. So you can expect the episodes to be kind of a mix of both, and I will use whichever technique makes the most sense for a given episode. As far as the gameplay itself, I am obviously playing on a PC, so I am using mods extensively. We will have roughly 200 or so plugins at work, and a number of additional mods over and above that are retextures or customized meshes or things like that, things that I've used either from the Nexus or created myself. The game I will be playing primarily on master difficulty. There may be some times when I dial it down or dial it up accordingly. The important thing here is this is not a demonstration of my prowess as a Skyrim player. That's not what this is all about. This is about telling a story. So if playing this on master difficulty serves the story, that's what I'll do. If there's an episode that requires that I play it on novice to serve the story, then that's what I'll do. I don't really care about difficulty level. I want a good story, I want good cinematics, and I want challenging battles and gameplay. So I will do whatever challenges me at that time and whatever makes the most sense for the episode. So that, again, will be all over the map. This is, quite honestly, probably the last I have to say about that question of game difficulty, because it's one of those things that comes up a lot in the comments. What difficulty is this at? What difficulty is this at? That kind of thing. I really honestly don't care. I did care about it in Aranis Arcana, but the further we got into the story, the less I cared about it. What is king here is the story. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do, and difficulty be damned. I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the production stuff going on. Because I do get a lot of questions about this. The Aranis Arcana story was something that I did completely alone. That was me. I was recording that. It wasn't until the last couple of episodes that I introduced a few bits of voice work, primarily done by Matt, just to kind of round things out a little bit. And that's where I got much more involved in script writing and things like that. But a lot of that was kind of narrative that was, from Fleet's perspective. It was, or it was from the perspective of another character. In other words, it was kind of like running monologue, if you will. 5 Fables is going to be produced much more like you would expect from a novel. Heavy in dialogue and character relationship, character interaction, things like that. So we're going to be learning a lot more about each of our characters and the story itself through dialogue. And that's what I really love about it. I think that's what makes it particularly exciting. And much more dynamic, I think. It is going to be something of a challenge, and I realized early on that with 5 main characters, two of whom are female, that if I really wanted to do this and do it well, I needed to ask for help. And so that's what I've done. Matt and Joe are both going to be involved doing voice work on this. And Jessa is also going to be doing voice work on this. So each of our 5 protagonists and many other characters are going to have original voice work with different actors providing that voice work. So I think when I say taking it to the next level, in part, that's what I mean. I've also advanced significantly my production capability since I did Aranis Arcana. It wasn't until right around the end of Aranis Arcana, ironically, that I upgraded my hardware. So if you go back and watch that story is produced entirely on Xbox and on a MacBook Pro running Windows 7 in a virtual. There are a few bits at the very, very end that were actually recorded on newer hardware. So I think understanding that is the other thing that kind of is going to amp this up. Not only have my production skills increased, but the hardware that I'm running this game on is significantly more powerful, which is going to mean more mods at my disposal, better graphics quality, and frankly, just more options. Many more options. So it's very exciting on many different levels here. One, that I've got a lot of production support here, which is going to give us a lot of sort of fun variation in the voice work and all of that stuff. The second, of course, that we've got a new hardware setup, which is going to increase the overall quality of the entire production. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that I think is really going to amp up quality or the experience of 5 Fables from what we did in Aranis Arcana is the addition of some really fantastic music. I've always used music. Music is a big part of all the production work that I do. But up until 5 Fables, I have always drawn music from, some of the resources that are available to me through my network partnership with N4G TV and Maker Studios. So I'm going out to sites like Epidemic Sound, for example, or Audio Micro, things like that. And, I'm grabbing royalty-free stuff with permission, stuff that's licensed that I can use, things like that. But I'm drawing, even though it's a large catalog, I'm drawing from a catalog that a lot of other YouTubers, thousands of YouTubers, draw from. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something completely unique, completely different, and really push things to the next level. So what I have done is struck up a partnership with a recording studio in Los Angeles called Cryo Chamber. And Cryo Chamber produces some of my favorite music in the world, which is basically dark, ambient, cinematic music, right? And it's very atmospheric kind of music, and they sort of specialize in that. So I have gotten permission to use their full catalog, and I plan to use it extensively. And I think that music, both its ambient qualities and its availability to me almost exclusively on YouTube, is really going to contribute to making 5 Fables something very special. So let's talk a little bit about format. Those of you who are familiar with CouchWarrior TV or just familiar with Let's Plays in general on YouTube kind of understand what that format is like. My plan is to turn it on its head a little bit and just continue to do my own thing, which is a nice mix of storytelling, role play, commentary, music, writing. To me, I consider this to be a form of artistic expression. This is how I'm choosing to express myself artistically. And this is how I'm choosing to write my novel, so to speak. And I'm doing it in an episodic fashion. So I think the real grand experiment in the way that these Let's Lives work is that I have a very broad story arc in my head. I know how the story ends, I know how the story begins, and I have a few milestones in between. But what makes it special is that it evolves as we go. The story changes and it goes interesting directions that even I wouldn't have expected as we move forward and the characters grow and evolve. So while I couldn't tell you how I would like this story to end and how I'm planning to have this story end, I have no idea how we're going to get there. And that's part of the experiment that I think makes it fun. It makes it entertaining and unpredictable, right? For those of you who are not intimately familiar with the whole, YouTube Let's Play experience, you could think of this as an episodic television show, kind of like Game of Thrones, where you tune in every so often and you get an update in the story. It is really a work of speculative fiction or fan fiction even, because I am a huge fan, obviously, of Skyrim and the Bethesda created universe of Elder Scrolls and Tamriel. So you can kind of think of it as that, or if you'd like, you could even think of it as sort of an audio book with video components and so forth. Really, what I'm using is the platform produced by Bethesda as a medium for telling a story in an episodic fashion and producing it strictly for YouTube and publishing it kind of in the same format that perhaps a TV show would come out in seasons. So my plan is that the 5 Fables will be broken into several seasons. I haven't decided where those themes are yet. That is a work in progress, but it doesn't stop me from starting the story. I know where the story begins, and so that's where we are going to kick off here at the end of January. as far as the hardware here, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on what I'm doing in terms of hardware and setup. As I said, I am using somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 plugins by the time this thing is said and done. So it does require that I have a machine that can really handle this. So what I'm doing is I'm running a gaming laptop, MSI G70 Dominator. This machine is probably a year and a half old, I would say. And I think in my younger days, I probably wouldn't have opted for a laptop. Ideally, I think you want to be gaming on a desktop whenever possible, but my life does not make it easy for me to have a single location where I can do everything. So for me, I need to be mobile. I need to be able to do the creative work whenever I have the time, regardless of where I am. And because of things like business travel and all that stuff, I mean, it would be a shame if, I went on a business trip and had 2 hours of downtime and couldn't do anything with it. So for me, it's really the choice to use a laptop was really essential to making any of this work. So the Dominator, the G70 Dominator, as I said, it's an MSI laptop. It's sizable. It's a monster, to be honest. Its nickname is Olga, and she goes with me just about everywhere. The specs on this thing, I've got 32 gigs of memory. I'm running an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 880M graphics card in here that has 8 gig graphics card. What else do you need to know? Oh, I'm running an i7 processor. It is, I want to say, I think 2.9 gigahertz, and it is slightly overclocked. I don't mess around a lot with overclocking because it's just too risky, and honestly, I don't need to overclock significantly to run Skyrim. It's just, how crazy do I want to get with all the graphics and stuff like that? So, but I get good frames, obviously, and then as far as the hard drive goes, I am running solid state drive here. I'm running my game on solid state, and then I've got an internal 1 terabyte drive that I use for kind of temporary file storage and stuff like that. The SSDs that I'm running my game on, I've got 3 solid state drives running in RAID 0, which makes them extremely fast. Great for running Skyrim on. RAID 0 is just, super fast, which is terrific. Now, there's not a lot of storage on those, so I have to constantly be aware, of how many mods I'm installing. I'm always on top of making sure that thing is clean, that there's not a lot of temp files and other crap on there gumming things up. So it does require a certain amount of maintenance to keep that nice and clean so that I don't run out of space on that critical array. So, but that's the basics. When I record, I'm using an external monitor. So typically I'm plugged into an external monitor, and then I'm using an external HD recording device by Elgato. It is an Elgato HD 60, I want to say, something like that. The Elgato external recording device, basically, it kind of does all the heavy lifting. So what I'm doing is my signal is going out from my laptop via HDMI into the Elgato box. The Elgato box is doing the video capture and then transferring that signal into my MacBook, where that is being recorded and saved as a file. So basically what it does is it allows me to run Skyrim on ultra settings and do all those things I need to do and not lose a bunch of frames as soon as I hit the record button. So it's a fantastic device. If you're thinking about doing any recording at all, I highly encourage trying something like the Elgato out. It's just dead simple to set it up. It's really plug and play. I used to use an external recording device called the Hauppauge. It's made by Hauppauge HD PVR 2, and it did a great job on my Xbox, but was extremely difficult to set up and buggy when recording from PC. So this new device has made a lot of things possible for me. So that's really the hardware setup in a nutshell. If you have any questions about the hardware setup, feel free to, send a question on the website. Use our web form. Send in a question. We'll try to answer it for you. If you have any hardware questions about either the Elgato or my PC setup. So what about the game setup? Well, since I launched the prologue video, I have basically overhauled my game setup completely. Essentially, I backed up all the mods that I had downloaded up to that point and then nuked everything. I basically removed Skyrim from my system entirely, and I cleaned everything out, optimized my system, replaced my graphics card, did a whole bunch of testing, and then once that was done, downloaded Skyrim again from Steam and started from scratch following the step guidelines for Skyrim. Now, I didn't follow them to the letter. I'm not limiting myself to only step-approved mods. However, I am going to great pains to make sure that I'm running the cleanest, most stable game that I possibly can. So from my perspective, what that looks like is I downloaded Skyrim and basically backed up all the installers for that, so I don't have to go back out to Steam if I ever need to reinstall it. Then essentially I started from scratch. I'm using Mod Organizer. If you are going to do any modding, I highly recommend using Mod Organizer. It's just a godsend. So that is a critical tool. I use Loot to help out with things like load order. And then I'm using Test5 Edit to clean a lot of my mods, and then a couple of other plugins for Mod Organizer, such as Finis, for some of the animation stuff and all that. Now, what I did is basically set up the vanilla game, got everything running with no mods inside of Mod Organizer. Then I've used Test5 Edit to go through and clean all of the DLC. So when I say clean, what I mean is that a lot of times mods will use resources from the vanilla game, and quite often you see situations where the mod has actually duplicated those resources rather than using the resources as they're available. And it's just kind of inefficient and sloppy. Test5 Edit allows you to basically remove those duplicate records, if you will, that are inside of a mod. And Loot is the tool that allows you to find out whether or not you have mods in your load order that may have issues. So there are kind of two facets to Loot, really. There's the ordering of your plugins, and so it helps you make sure you have the right load order for things. But there's also a reporting feature in there where you can basically see the full list of all the mods you're running. It'll let you know if you've got any that are kind of in a warning state or have conflicts or things going on, and let you know if it's advisable to go in and clean those with Test5 Edit. So anyway, that's really what it's all about. And so even in Bethesda's own DLC, they're like duplicate master records or something like that. I forget what they are called. I was just doing a bunch of this work last night. It's disgusting that I can't remember what they're called. But essentially, even Dawnguard DLC has these duplicates that need to be cleaned out, which is kind of amazing. So I created cleaned copies of all the DLC, and then basically progressed through my entire mod list. Started downloading the things that I needed from scratch to make sure I had all the latest copies of everything, and then walked through the step guidelines and tried to make sure that I was doing everything I could to run a stable game. So it meant a lot of testing and stuff like that. We've talked about this, in fact, in the last episode of this podcast, the last episode of 2015, we discussed some of this setup a little bit, and I talked a lot about Chester Tester, my test characters. So essentially what I'm doing is trying to create a structure in Mod Organizer that allows me to roll back if I ever need to roll back. So I grabbed up kind of all the immersive world mods, all the foliage mods and, animal mods and weather mods and all of those different things that were going to make the world of Skyrim that the story would take place in. I installed those, I got them running well, and I saved them in a profile called World Build, 5 Fables World Build. And then I duplicated that and then started adding in all the mods that created the towns and the cities and the citizens and all of those, like any changes in the structure of economics or stuff like that. All of that stuff that would be on top of this kind of wilderness environment that I created in the first one. Did all that testing and saved that, made a copy of that, and then rolled forward and started putting in all the additional mods that would go into supporting all of my characters. So my goal is to really come up with sort of a standard mod profile that all of the characters in the story will adhere to 100%. And then beyond that, I have custom profiles then for each character on top of that base. So essentially what I've done is just created a very stable base, and then each character has their own profile built on top of that common base, and into their profile are any additional mods that are specific to that character. So Robard, we know, for example, is a bard. So I need a profile for Robard that allows us to see the story from his perspective. And when we're playing Robard, when we're following Robard's part of the story, he needs to be able to have access to the tools in the Become a Bard mod, for example. So he is actually running that mod in his profile, but that mod is not required for the other characters in the story. So those characters don't have that particular mod active. So in that way, I'm able to get some individuality across these characters, but then also, avoid things like game bloat, So I may have, 300 mods or something like that in Mod Organizer, but in a particular character profile, I'm not running all 300. I'm only running the one that particular character requires. How is this story going to be structured? It's complicated. In Aranis Arcana, we were basically following Fleet Featherstone, a single character, a single game, a single profile. So now this is different. We want to be able to tell the story from the perspective of multiple characters, not just the 5 fables. We want to be able to see aspects of the story from our antagonist's perspective. We want to be able to see aspects of the story from our narrator's perspective, who is Spurious Teufel. There are several other supporting characters who we are going to see their perspective on the story. And for each one of these characters, that means I also need a profile in Mod Organizer. So if you imagine a scenario. We've got Robard, and we're taking in the story from his perspective. However, we want one of the other primary characters, perhaps Julian, to be following along with Robard as an NPC. So now you can imagine the complexity. So the way that this is working is every character in the story has a profile in Mod Organizer, but for every character that is in the story, I also have a mod, a NPC mod. So I've got an NPC mod called CW Fable Robard Graves. And essentially what that mod does is it creates a follower NPC that is Robard Graves. He looks like Robard, he acts like Robard, he follows like a normal follower. And in addition to being a follower, that Robard Graves mod also produces Robard's look as a preset inside Skyrim's character creation tool. So by installing that one mod, I'm able to use Robard in-game as a follower, and I'm also able to create a new game of my own in which I can basically create a player character with Robard as a preset. So Robard happens to be a Nord, so with that mod loaded, I can launch Skyrim and I can say start a new game, and when the character creation tools come up, I can select Nord, go down to the preset and run the preset slider all the way to the far right, and pop, there's Robard Graves, and I can play as him. So what this does is it gives me a ton of flexibility, and it also allows me to make doubly sure that my player character version of Robard Graves looks exactly like my NPC version. And that is really the foundation, or the little bit of magic that this whole story is running on. So I will be able to tell the story from Julian's perspective with Robard and Bella as followers. I'll be able to tell the story from Shulat's perspective with Julian and Emiria as followers, that kind of thing, right? So it gives me tons and tons of flexibility. Now it is my job as the storyteller then to reconcile who is taking what quests and what bits of footage to avoid in each profile so that we keep consistency. But this is something that goes back to one of our very early discussions on this podcast in episode 4 about the Epicosity project. The 5 Fables is my Epicosity project put out there for the world to see. 5 characters, 5 profiles, 5 perspectives, all of whom can be player characters, all of whom can be followers. It's pretty cool. And so with those 5 created, I've got all the mods created for the primary characters. I've got mod created for my primary antagonist. I've got a mod created for Spurious Teufel. I've got a mod created for one of Robard's henchmen, and there will be many more to come. And these are really complete with everything from inventory, traits, all the hair and skin and all of those kind of face gen kinds of things going on. So they look exactly alike. They all have AI packages. So they have certain things they do during the day for work, certain things they do in the evening to relax, and certain things they do at night or whenever to go to sleep. They have all of these schedules established, and maybe particular idols or things that they do that are very individualistic to each one and fit their personalities. The only thing that they don't have is any custom voices. They all use kind of the vanilla voices, and for me that was it was a necessity. It would be too much work for me to try to create all of these NPCs with custom voices. which is fine because when I actually use them as NPCs, I'll probably be overdubbing the voice work of our voice actors, myself, Joe, Matt, and Jessa. So that'll save me a bunch of production work. But the cool thing about this, folks, and what I think is really exciting, is that as we progress through the story, I've basically got all of these mods ready to go, and I'm going to release them to you all on Nexus so that if you want to play around with these action figures, you can do that. And they're fully supported. They're going to work perfectly. If you want to download them just so that you can play your own character that looks like one of these characters, that's cool. You can also use the very same mod to have your own character, but use one of these as an NPC follower. So should be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you all decide to do with those. Now, the glue that kind of holds it all together, of course, is the script. So I am writing the script episode by episode. The first 4 scripts are complete, and voice work is underway on all of those. So my objective would be to release the first episode here the end of January, and then start rolling them out as they're finished after that. So that is that. I think, it could be kind of fun here. Let's just take a moment to talk a little bit about the characters. I'm not going to divulge information on all the characters. I thought I would talk a little bit about Julian and Robard, because Julian and Robard are characters that are going to feature prominently in the first 10 episodes. First 5 episodes, I suppose. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about them, because we talk all the time on this podcast about role play and character development, and how do we make our characters real. And I talk a lot about how, for me, the way that I truly get in touch with a character's personality is through dialogue with others. And through the eyes of other characters, as opposed to something like a detailed character background. Typically, a character background is really almost like a historical accounting of a character's past. And while that's helpful in understanding where a character came from and what the events were in their past that were formative for them, it doesn't help us very much when it comes to figuring out their true personality. The fact that Robard was a troubled child, and he was, in trouble with the law, and he was ostracized by his community and all that stuff, it tells me that Robard had a rough life. But it doesn't tell me anything about his personality. It doesn't tell me anything about his mannerisms, or his likes or dislikes, or his way of speaking, or anything like that. So that's where things like vignettes in the dialogue come in. And, the typical screenplay is packed with dialogue. A movie screenplay is almost entirely dialogue. We do have some elements in there that kind of set the stage or set the scene, but ultimately it's about interaction between characters, with a few rare exceptions. So I thought it would be kind of fun to give a little bit of background on who Julian is. I've got, a couple of paragraphs on both Julian and Robard to give you a little bit of a primer for who these characters are, so that you can kind of anticipate some of the things that are going into creation of these characters, and that will, come into play more as the story evolves. Robard has been mentioned quite a few times in the podcast, and that's no accident. Not only is he one of the most fun characters I've ever played, but he also features prominently in the story. So here's my couple paragraphs on Robard. Robard Graves was born and raised in Morthal, the bastard son of Idgrod Ravencrone. An unapologetic black sheep and despot from an early age, Robard has run afoul of the law as well as social and cultural mores so often as to be jailed, exiled, excommunicated, hunted, and wanted in Skyrim, Cyrodiil, and some say High Rock. Through it all, Robard has prevailed and survived through pure guile, quick wit, and a talent for deception. However, beneath the menace and the litany of black deeds, Robard Graves lives for his music. A masterful lute player, he has studied with masters in Cyrodiil and Skyrim alike, but time after time, his dreams of a life dedicated to his music have fallen victim to his penchant for self-destruction. That is the elevator pitch describing who Robard is. What is Robard doing in Skyrim at the beginning of our story? Having worn out his welcome in Cyrodiil, Robard has returned to Skyrim and taken a job as warden of a mining camp owned and operated by the Silverblood family. Frustrated and bored, Robard's appetites for violence, women, and strong drink often take him down dark and destructive paths. In recent years, he has leveraged his considerable talents with the longbow and hand axe to carve out a reputation as an effective mercenary and bounty hunter. However, the many abuses of his lifestyle have taken their toll, and Robard suffers from chronic and debilitating joint pain, the result of years of brawling and untreated injuries, with only temporary relief to be found at the bottom of a bottle. So that paragraph sets the stage, right? Robard has been away from Skyrim. Now he's back for whatever reason. All we know is that he wore out his welcome in Cyrodiil, so presumably that was no longer a safe place for him to be. And now he's back in Skyrim, and he is relegated to taking a boring job, a job that he's not suited to in order to get by. So what about Julian? Julian Bitteridge is a swashbuckling Breton drawn to Skyrim after years at sea by the unexplained disappearance of his mother in the dark and lonely recesses of the Reach. A wealthy and adventurous widow, Julia Bitteridge left behind a world of comfort and privilege to pursue a life of exploration, discovery, and adventure, only to vanish into the Reach along with her entire expedition. Now, a year after her disappearance, Julian has taken up residence in his mother's home, where he relentlessly studies her research materials in search of any clues to her fate. That is the paragraph that gives us a little bit of background information on Julian. In the prime of his life, Julian Wingate Bitteridge is a gentleman and swordsman of profound confidence and capability. After years at sea, he possesses a uniquely open-minded worldview and positive outlook on the potential of humanity. But behind the noble swordsman there lies a singular intellect. Julian is driven by the desire to create and discover, and has become a tireless researcher into the civilization, architecture, and construction techniques of the Dwemer. A master of metallurgy, Julian has unlocked the secrets of artifice and has used his knowledge to great advantage as he scours Skyrim in search of clues to his mother's disappearance. That kind of sets the stage for those two characters. I thought it would be nice to just give you a little bit of background and kind of let you know how I sort of piece together at a very high level who these characters are, and give you a brief introduction into two of the characters you're going to be seeing a lot of in the story. Now, of course, we have 3 other fables to discuss. I'm not going to discuss them in detail in this episode, but we are going to learn much more about them in future episodes. One of them, of course, is another character who has been mentioned on the podcast before, the Redguard Shulat Sheshkala. He is primarily an Imperial Legionnaire and officer. Then we have the High Elf, Bella Luna. She is kind of a sort of a noble spirit. She's traveled to Skyrim for the express purpose of attending the Mage College and learning everything she can there. And then she is accompanied by a Dunmer named Emiria. And Emiria is, I would say, the polar opposite of Bella. So where Bella is a very kind of positive and more bubbly personality, perhaps even a little bit naive, Emiria is somewhat jaded and brooding, and she tends more toward the lifestyle of an assassin. So I think, if we were to describe this group in general terms, we would say that we have Robard is kind of I would say he's most representative of perhaps Ranger type of a character class. Obviously, Shulat, pure warrior. I would consider Bella to be probably more of a mage, sorceress. Emiria, I would consider her to be probably more of an assassin, although she is quite an accomplished mage in her own right, but she is focused almost entirely on illusion. And then finally we have Julian, who sort of breaks the mold, and I would say that Julian is equal parts artisan and warrior, so I tend to think of him a little bit as a master of artifice. So while he is a good warrior, kind of a sword and board type of a fighter, he is also extremely accomplished in a lot of areas of artifice, specifically blacksmithing and enchanting, and that all sort of plays into his background as kind of a researcher and an inventor. So it'll be these 5 characters who are our primary characters. These characters, when we start this game, they are not going to be starting at level 1. This is not the story of a level 1 character who, has all of these difficult journeys and then grows in power and stuff like that. Certainly these characters are going to grow in power as the adventure goes on, but they are starting this story as fairly accomplished individuals. So when the story begins, Robard will be at level 30. And, I think Robard, Bella, and Emiria will all be level 30 characters. Shulat is level 27, and Julian will be at level 40. when this whole thing starts. So we're getting kind of a mixed bag of, levels of accomplishment and prowess in their various areas. But I think it lends itself well to the story, and it means that we're going to be able to start the story off really with these characters not focused on the growth that is typical of the authored Skyrim experience, but it's the story of mature characters who've seen the world, who've done things, and they are being thrust into the midst of the epic events that are going on in Skyrim. I'm really excited about this opportunity, and it's important to me that you understand the level of effort and care that is going into this production with the team of people that are assembled here. Yes, this is being published on YouTube, but it is going to be on YouTube completely ad-free. So you will not see pop-up ads appearing on any 5 Fables episodes. What I'm interested in having you, the viewers, support the 5 Fables if you feel like this content is worth supporting. So for me, my objective is to present you with the best, most engaging, and most immersive story possible. And I thought, you know what? The best way to do that is to just switch off YouTube ads completely. So when you watch these episodes, they're uninterrupted, and you can go full screen and not worry about banners and not worry about pop-ups and not worry about delays. You can just experience the story episode to episode, and if you feel like it's worthwhile, there will be a Patreon campaign specifically for 5 Fables. And if you contribute to that Patreon campaign, there's going to be a bunch of interesting things available, but you'll have your name listed in the credits as one of the people who made the story, who makes the story possible. I thank you so much for listening and for all of your support. The release of the prologue was amazing. I mean, over 1,000 views in less than 8 hours. So we are all very excited to release this, and you can expect the first episode to land the end of January, and then the 5 Fables will be underway. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you'd like to leave any mail for the Crusaders, please feel free to do so. You can go to our website at charactercrusade.com. At the bottom of every single page, there's a form where you can leave us feedback. You can send us your character quandaries or, any other messages that you care to. You can always find us also on Facebook, or you can follow Character Crusade on Twitter at CharacterWonk. We are going to be in the studio next week recording episode 21, and we are all extremely excited about it. Episode 21 is going to feature prominently listener mail. We've gotten so much mail from you guys. We are falling behind. We're going to address a whole bunch of things, and we have a brand new segment that we're very excited about. We are kind of affectionately calling it Quest Connector. And what we're doing for Quest Connector is we have cataloged all of the quests available in Skyrim and put them into a spreadsheet, and we will be using this technique, this spreadsheet. We're going to be using this spreadsheet to randomly select quests. We're going to talk about ways that as role players we could tie those quests together for different character archetypes. So We're going to randomly roll 2 quests, and we're going to randomly roll a character archetype such as barbarian or cleric or something like that. And then we're just going to have great discussion on, okay, what could we do to tie these 2 quests together? And we're really excited about what some of the random outcomes of that exercise might be. But the ultimate goal, of course, is to do what we always do and figure out how to turn Skyrim into the best possible roleplay and gaming experience you can have. Until next time, I hope that you all had a great holiday, are all looking forward to a great 2016. We are very excited, and we will catch you next time on Character Crusade.